So we got it breached, got it. Man, ran in there. My partner disappeared. Popped that cornet, went and bought me a bull rope and a pair of spurs. And I was in business. And, they teach you how to fight. But when you're on the side of the road, and every officer knows this, you can't lose. If you lose, you're going to die.
We have in the house today Mr. Kenny Wadsworth, Texas Ranger. And you are retired, though, right?
I am retired.
Man. Ozona? Is that where you were for most of the time?
I was in Ozona for, I was a trooper in Ozona for, God, I can't remember how many years. I guess I went to Ozona in 93, and then I waited till Dean got out of high school, and then I promoted into auto theft, which is, back then it was called CLE, Criminal Law Enforcement. And then I did that for a couple of years, then came back to Ozona as a ranger.
How long were you a state trooper?
23.
Oh, good heavens.
Plus years, yeah. And after I retired, I was a cattle ranger for another 5 or 6 years.
What were you in law enforcement before being a highway patrolman?
No, I was a horse shooter.
Okay.
Yeah, I shoot horses all over the country. I got to shooting a lot of polo horses and traveled all over the country shooting polo horses and other horses also. And had a wife, 3 kids, and the gross was a lot more than the net. And anyway, I had a good friend of mine who's passed away a couple of years ago, one of the closest friends I ever had in my life. He was a state trooper. And he came by the house one day, and I had a horse set back and break my foot. And, when you're a horse shooter and your head ain't down and your butt ain't up, you ain't making any money.
Right.
And I told him, I said, man, I got to find me a real job, something with insurance, retirement, stuff like that. And he said, come go to work for us. And I said, there ain't no way to hire me. I got a ticket in every state west of the Mississippi, at one time. He said, that ain't a problem, He said, just try. So I tried, and
And how old were you at the time?
I was 31.
Okay.
I was 31 years old, and I got accepted and went to recruit school down in Austin, which is Dante's Inferno. That was the toughest 21 weeks of my life.
21 weeks?
21 weeks. We started out with, I think like 140, 150 people, and we graduated, I think, 99. They run them out pretty quick.
Really?
Pretty tough deal.
What was that like? Like physically, was it like boot camp or what did they?
It was boot camp on steroids. My very good friend Hank Whitman, he was chief of the Rangers whenever he retired. He was my age, 30 up, and he was a Marine. And I asked him, I said, "How's this compared to Marine boot camp?" He said, "Well." He said it's a lot alike, he said, but a lot worse in another way because your pickup's right outside and you can leave anytime you want to.
Oh, man.
He said in Marine boot camp that wasn't an option,
Dang.
And, it was tough. You did a lot of fighting, lots of studying. It started early morning and sometimes quit late at night. But
when you say fighting, like hand-to-hand stuff?
Yes, lots of it.
Really?
Yes. They teach you how to fight. But when you're on the side of the road, and every officer knows this, you can't lose. If you lose, you're going to die.
Right.
So they teach you how to fight. And, you got to survive. You got to go home at the end of your shift, And, they teach you a lot. And, you keep up with it. And, of course, you go on these lots of running, lots of setups, lots of push-ups, lots of physical, lots of mental.
Were you ready for it physically?
I thought I was. I was running 8-9 miles a day and doing 100-yard wind sprints. And I got down there in
89 miles.
It's the real deal.
And
it's like 4 marathons.
That's almost.
I was in great running shape, but then there's a lot more to it than that.
Right.
And back they've changed a lot of stuff, since I went through that thing. They've had some pretty bad deals down there, but God, we used to just beat the hell out of each other.
Yeah.
On
the fighting part.
Yes. And, everything has changed. You had spelling tests every week, but they weren't, call out the word spell. They gave you a sheet of paper and it had a definition, and you had to fill in the definition. And, you studied a lot. And I was the last class to graduate with revolvers. And I look at these young troopers now. They come out of, you see them, God, they got so much stuff on their belt. I don't know how it doesn't break their back, When I came out, we had a revolver, 2 speed loaders, handcuffs, and maybe had a baton ring, It wasn't
So if you'd been shoeing horses and you go through this boot camp of a training, you knew at that point, did you just didn't have any quit in you, or you knew at that point you were going to really enjoy that job?
Oh, I could.
Or both?
No, there's no quit. That was not even an option for me to quit, because I had too many friends that helped me get into DPS.
And you didn't want to let them down.
And I would never let them. And also, they pay you when you go to school.
Gotcha.
And so I would go to, we got off on the weekends. I came home and shoot horses every weekend.
Mm-hmm.
It was one of those deals. I was not going to quit. They could carry me out, but I wasn't going to quit.
You remember the Republic of Texas standoff back in the 90s?
Uh-uh.
It was right after
At Fort
Waco.
Davis.
It's a very Waco type of thing, but it's out in Fort Davis. It was like a 2 or 3 week standoff. I believe.
Yeah.
And Dad's out there with his night vision and everything. At that time, he's a trooper. And one of the, whatever the mounted horses do, I don't know
It's
who.
prison
horses. Throw the shoe, so he stripped off his gear and tacked the shoe on. And his.
I wound up shooting 2 horses.
Yeah, well, anyways, his lieutenant or whatever writes him up to fire him for being out of his body armor and everything. He's out there
dang.
he just took his shirt off, got his wife beater on in his police outfit under that. And then whoever's above him said, "Anybody get a picture of you doing that?" He goes, "No." He goes, "Damn, I'd like to have that. You're fine."
Yeah. Yeah. Dang. They almost fired you for that?
Well, one guy wanted the higher up loved it.
Well,
but the guy
see,
in between
at that
didn't.
time I was in license weight, but when they sent me out there originally, it's kind of a long story, but anyway, we license weight had those vans, they had on the side of the road running check trucks and stuff. Well, they sent the van out there to have a command post, and they called me and said, "Hey, man, get out there to Fort Davis and take care of the van." Well, when I get out there, they've already got a hook to electricity, so ain't nothing for me to do. And so I go in there to the command post. It's run by Highway Patrol, and Highway Patrol did not get along with license weight very much back in them days, And I said, "Y'all need me to do anything?" He said, "No, go stand by." Well, I stood by for about 5 or 6 hours, sitting on a rock, not doing nothing. Anyway, the prison horses came in, and the guy who was the captain of the prison, he used to be the sheriff in Big Lake, and I shoot his horses. I took care. And they said, "Hey, man, we got 2 horses through some shoes. We're going to have to go back to Fort Stockton and get one of the inmates to come shoe these horses." And the captain said, "There's a horseshoer right there on that rock." And I said, "I don't have any stuff." He said, "We got everything." I've been sitting here 5 hours. I said, "Yeah, I'll shoe him." So I take off my gear and I shoe the horse, and I'm almost through. And this lieutenant, Highway Patrol lieutenant, I'm not going to mention any names, but I did not care for the man. And he came by there and he threw a fit. He said, "What are you doing?" I said, "Well, I'm shoeing horses for the prison." He said, "Get your uniform on and get to command post now." Well, I didn't do the now deal. I went ahead and finished. Put my stuff back on, walked in there, and he said, "You came out here not to shoe horses. You came out here to do what we tell you to do." I said,
Came out here to sit on a rock, by
"Yeah,
God.
I came out here to sit on a rock." And I said, "Well, I thought I'd help out any way I can." He said, "There will be a formal C1 written up on you for being out of uniform and all this stuff." And he said, "Go sit back out on a rock." So I went back out there and sat on a rock, and then they called me back in. I figured, well, they're going to send me home or something, which that'd be all right too. And they said, hey, we understand that you're familiar with the U Up and Down Ranch, which was on the north side of where their little compound was. And said, we need you to go over there, and we need to set up a lookout post there. And I said, yeah, I know exactly where it is. So we went over there and set up. And, man, we're way up in the mountains, and it's we were right behind, what's that? I can't remember that big mountain's name. Anyway, we were watching a valley, in case they tried to come out through the valley. And we get out there, and my lieutenant calls me on the radio, and he said, hey, where are you? And I said, well, I'm on the north side of the U Up and Down Ranch. I said, I'm just south of a couple of miles south of the observatory. I said, I'll meet you out on the road. So I'm expecting, kind of get a chewing out. And my lieutenant, he's cool. I mean, he's a cool guy. I love him to death. And he said, so you're shoeing horses? And I said, yes, sir. I said, well, instead of them having to go to Fort Stockton and pick up somebody, I said, I shoot them. He said, you charge them? I said, no, I didn't charge them. He said, anybody get any pictures of you shooting that horse? And I said, no, sir, not that I'm aware of. He said, I wish I did. He said, that way I could tell them when I send a man out to help, he can do anything from shoe a horse to dig a post hole. And I said, am I in trouble? He said, no, you're not.
Yeah.
He said, you're not in trouble.
What year were you, how long had you been a deputy by then, or a highway patrolman?
I was a trooper. I was a licensed. I think that it had to be after 94. When I went in in 90, and I don't know if you, from 90, 91, 92, 93, I was in Colorado City as a highway patrol trooper. And that was, I can tell you a lot of stories about those 3 years. I was on the riot squad. I went to a lot of Ku Klux Klan rallies.
Whoa.
And because all the young guys got
with a baton, not a hood.
yeah. Anyway, I mean, I went to a bunch of them. But I'll never forget the first Klan rally. I didn't even know the Klan existed, and I went to my very first one, and it was in Brownwood, and they sent us over there. Well, our job basically is to stand between the Klan and the crowd, and the crowd's in front of us, and the Klan is behind us. And when those guys come out, they all look like big old fat guys with beards or little skinny guys with no teeth, I mean, I wasn't impressed with them.
Yeah.
Anyway, I can't see them much, when they start talking, and they just kind of try to excite the crowd, and the more it goes, and the more it goes, and but at the very end, the Grand Dragon comes out and talks, and I can't see him, because I'm focused on the crowd and trying to stay, stern face, no smiling, and this guy starts talking, and he sounds like Elmer Fudd. And I could just see Elmer Fudd wearing a hoodie, and I'm thinking he's going to say Wasquy Wabbit any minute, Anyway, so I'm trying not to laugh, because I'm supposed to be there serious,
Yeah.
And I'm trying not to laugh, and I kind of out of the corner of your eyes look at the guys standing to the left and right, and they're doing the same thing. We're all wanting to, and you always got some jokers, There's always going to be them guys. And anyway, he'd have that baton, and he'd tap me with that, and he said, "Wabbit season, duck season, wabbit season."
This guy's very racist.
So he's trying to make me laugh,
Yeah.
And but anyway, we went to a bunch of those. Some of them got a little Western.
Yeah. Really?
Yeah. Some of
In
them,
what way?
Oh, I guess the worst one that we ever went to, and I ever went to, was in Austin, and had a big Klan rally, and it was on Martin Luther King Day.
Golly.
And anyway, there were a bunch of us there. There were lots of us there. But they sent my squad out there to clear the steps of the Capitol, to get the people off of the steps so the Klan could set up. And that got a little, I kind of got a little bit like Davy Crockett and him boys down there. I mean, they didn't send enough of us out there. And when we got the people off, well, then they kind of surrounded us. And we looked like those yaks with the wolves, and we all kind of had our backs to each other. And I can't go into a lot of detail because I don't know if statute of limitations is over with, but we won.
Yeah.
Yeah, we won.
Why were they coming? I mean, it's not like you guys were on their side or anything.
Well, they don't.
Y'all were just there to keep the peace, right?
Well, we're there to keep the peace, and those people, I don't agree with them not one bit. But the First Amendment is First Amendment.
Gotcha.
That's what it is, and we took a vow.
Right.
We're going to protect, the Constitution.
So they send the young guys out to do detail like that. Is that what you said?
Yeah. There were a bunch of youngins, and I mean, there's a few of them old boys had a little time on,
right.
But and in Colorado City, that was not a desirable station for a lot of people, but I had a blast there.
Uh-huh.
I mean, I had too much fun.
What part of the job was the most fun for you?
Oh, I guess, I had so many fun jobs through my career. I got to see so many things that nobody would ever. But I would think my favorite job I had is when I was in CLE and auto theft. I had two great jobs. One of them was I got to work the racetracks, parimutuel tracks. And
well, I guess I'll let you tell that story. But I mean, just when you say you had so much fun, those in Colorado City, that specifically, like what part of the day, what would happen throughout the day that excited you? Because I mean, a traffic stop is a traffic stop.
Oh, but we weren't concrete troopers. We were rural troopers. So we backed up the PD, we backed up the sheriff's office, and we all worked together very closely.
Mm-hmm.
Got to work with some of the greatest people I've ever worked with in my life. And we made it fun. We helped them, they helped us. I don't know in the bigger cities where it's not like that. I've worked rural my whole career. But, we had every day you went to work was a new adventure. But you always knew, when you worked the weekend nights. And you knew something
you're catching people doing stuff or more like serving warrants kind of deal?
Well, basically the sheriff's office served warrant. If they had what they call a hot warrant, we'd help them with that. But just basic routine work, just out there working. You were going to get into something. Something was going to happen. And, I don't know, the Rodney King back that's when I was in Colorado City. And I had a partner who's since passed away. And he was the kind of guy that could make the Pope mad.
Yeah.
But, I mean, great partner. But he was always pulling things. And anyway, I stopped a van one time, and it was in like November, late October, November. And anyway, in Colorado City, where the interstate goes over the Colorado River, where those hills are, in November, late October, November, rattlesnakes would come out on pavements to soak up the heat, and there were a bunch of them. Anyway, we'd go by, lots of them there. We weren't there when I made this stop. And I stopped this van, and they kicked the door open, and these people just start pouring out of the van. And we're hollering at them, get back in the vehicle. And, I mean, things were going downhill quickly, very quickly. I'm focused on the driver, and all of a sudden I hear this boom, boom, 2 gunshots. I almost shot the driver. I mean, I didn't know who was shooting, whatever. And then I hear, rattlesnakes, there's rattlesnakes everywhere, And these people are from California. They're piling back in the van. I'm shaking like a leaf, and I walk up to the driver, and, I tell him, slow this SOB down and get the hell out of Texas. And I come back and my heart's pumping like that. I said, what the hell do you do? He said, oh, it looked like you need a little help. You know, he said, I figured the best way to do it. He said, because I know them people scared of rattlesnakes.
Oh, there weren't any at all.
There wasn't a
Yeah,
rattlesnake
he was
anywhere.
just, your partner was just,
he was just pretending like there were rattlesnakes.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I mean,
we need a code word next time or
yeah,
something.
we need a code word. But, you know, I mean,
Golly.
that guy was a hoot to work with, and I miss him dearly, you know.
What was his name?
His name was Carl Cassee. And he was a great guy to work with. Him and I went through recruit school together, and God, they kind of ran him through the mill, which is a whole nother story. But he was a great guy to work with, and he had been a cop before. I was a horseshoer. He was a cop before, so
Gotcha.
he taught me a lot, you know, about.
So I thought maybe you had to have some time in law enforcement before becoming a state trooper.
No, you back then, having time on. You could apply, or you also had to have. Back when I went through, it was like 60 hours of college. But we had a lot of guys that had experience. We had a lot of guys that didn't have any experience. You know.
And then, so you're a state trooper for 23 years. Is that what you said?
Well, I was a state trooper for I think 16 years, and then I promoted and I went plainclothes into motor vehicle theft. Which God, that was a great job.
Explain that job to me.
Well, we did a lot of things. Motor vehicle theft was a very small unit back then. I think there was 107 in the state back, and they specialize on vehicle identification. But they also, after 9/11, they got handed a lot of stuff. So we were the fugitive task force. We hunted down the top 10 most wanted fugitives in the state, which was, I loved that job. We were over the racetracks, the horse tracks, the parimutuel tracks, which I loved that.
What do you mean you were over them?
Well, we would work them, go in there, kind of check everybody out, and make sure that you know they keep the drugs out and the crooks out, and license clean. And we made a lot of good cases there.
So kind of somewhat undercover.
A little bit. I did some undercover work. Some of that I can tell, some of it I can't.
So you did more. It was more than auto theft.
Oh yeah.
Because that sounds very specific.
Well, the auto theft was a lot more than auto theft. But the great thing about auto theft was we had so many people in auto theft that specialized in different vehicles, everything from yellow equipment to airplanes. And you knew who was a specialist on a Ford Mustang or who was a specialist on a Ford truck, Chevrolet truck. We had a guy in Corpus Christi who was the trailer genius. I mean, you could send him pictures of a trailer, and he could tell you where to go try to find, numbers to get it ID'd. And and those guys they would go to the factories where they were built. You know, I mean, they were that good. And so, you'd get a call of a suspicious stolen vehicle or something like that. And you could pull up there because you're the auto theft guy, and they're all looking around. I could make a phone call, and they'd say, hey, yeah, go here, here, and there. And it'd make you look really smart. You just walk up, yeah, it's right here, And, but it's not that I knew it.
You knew a guy that knew a guy.
I knew a guy that knew a guy, But
are there still those individuals?
They pretty much did away with that, and it was so sad when they did that. They kind of tore down. They call it tearing down the silos or something. So now they all work with narcotics and intelligence, and so everybody kind of does everything. But they don't have the specialists that they had back then. But I got out, and about time they started taking that out, that's when I really went to studying to be a ranger.
What was enticing about that?
Being a ranger?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, my God. When I was 3 years old, my mother wrote a letter to my grandmother and talking about the kids and this. And she wrote down there, she said, Kenny won't wear his tennis shoes. All he wants to wear is his boots because he wants to be a Texas Ranger. And she underlined it. And I have that framed in my house.
Wow.
I guess I always wanted to be a ranger, but I really didn't realize it. But, being a Texas Ranger is the biggest honor I've ever had.
Some people would say a father, but
well, I mean, But
Yeah, even over Dean here. Like, as much as
No,
I love Dean.
I have siblings, like obviously over me. I'm talking about the other two.
you know, I mean, but it's you know, that organization is over 200 years old, 201 years old, and it's the people that went before me, and I guess I read a lot of books on them and stuff.
Did you know my great-great-granddad was one?
I'm sure he was.
I think I told you. It's been a while.
You know, and those guys that went before me, you know, they were the real deal. The Rangers have changed. They're more investigative, but I mean, there's so many smart people in the Rangers, and they're a very, very close-knit organization. When I went into the Rangers, I was, golly, how old was I? I was in my late 40s when I went into the Rangers, and I was kind of one of the young ones. You know, there were several younger than me, but I was pretty much middle ground, you know. And man, those guys had, you know, but you in the Rangers, you could pick up the phone, and it was like anything else. Man, I need some help. We'll be there in a second. You know, I mean, it's very close knit.
What's your day to day look like? Like what all kind of?
You never knew. Well, one thing is you spend a lot of time writing reports, and I was not very good at that. Boy, there's a lot of report writing because you write down everything. But I had so many counties. I was a West Texas Ranger. I had 5 counties.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you had a ranger that was, you know, that transferred out, you had his county. So you never really knew. You know, when the phone rings, you go. You know, there's no.
What kind of call would be on the other end of the line? What kind of ask?
Well, it could be anything from a murder to a child molestation. And you worked a lot of those. It could be a burglary. It could be we worked quite a few what they call custody deaths. You work around a lot of dead people. And that's... Yeah.
Was it a little more reactive? Meaning like something had happened and you show up,
yes.
or was it ever active things?
Well, we did active things too, but not near as much active. The Rangers, we did a lot of reactive. In CID and auto theft, we did a lot of proactive stuff. And of course, as a trooper, you know, you're front line. But you know, I mean, you never knew what was going to come. You know, every day was different. You know, you would go from bored to death to scared to death in 2.2 seconds, you know. But you're the Rangers, so you got to be the tough one, you know. I mean, you know, it's
I guess the reactive part is there's been a murder, and now you've got to
solve that murder.
And so chasing down whoever that person is would be the dangerous part of your job.
Well, you know, most of them, I mean, there are those cold cases. We have a bunch of Rangers that don't do anything but work cold cases. And Dean's father-in-law, who is my captain, Jerry Byrne, he was the best investigator I've ever met in my career. He was a Ranger in Ozona when I was a trooper there. Mm. And I probably learned as much from him as I did anybody. I mean, he was amazing on cold case and digging things, but he solved some murders that were very, very old, you know, 20 plus years old.
Wow.
Yeah. You know, and I mean, he's an unbelievable investigator. He's also an unbelievable interrogator. He's a great interrogator. And I learned a lot from him, but those cold cases, they still work them. You never give up. I think the biggest disappointment that I had in my career, that back in the early 80s, there was a serial killer. He was a truck driver. They wrote books on him. And his name was Robert Ben Rhodes. And he's the closest to Satan that I've ever met in my life. Mm. And he killed a lot of people, but he pick up hitchhikers and torture them and kill them. And he picked up this little girl. She was from Silver City, No, not Silver City. What's south of Reno? Carson City. Picked her up. I don't know what all he did to her, but he wound up killing her somewhere between Sierra Blanca and Van Horn, off the road. And we went out there several times and looked and looked and looked and never found her. And
How'd you know she was out there?
just by what notes and evidence we had, we felt very sure that she was going to be in that area.
Mm.
And I think the biggest disappointment is that we never found her. And I always think, my dad was MIA'd in the jungle of Vietnam for 36 years, and they found him.
Yeah.
But I never could find that girl in West Texas.
Dang.
And that always kind of haunts you, because her mother's since passed, but I wish that I could have delivered the message to her mother like the message they delivered to my mother when they found my dad's remains.
Dang.
But I never got to do that.
But they caught the killer?
Yeah, they got him. I don't even know if he's still alive. I think he's got a couple of life sentences to do up in Indiana, Illinois, somewhere, and then he finishes them. He come finish out in Texas. Anyway, let's.
So that part of the job was probably, obviously, the harder to deal with.
The hardest thing. Any police officer.
Anything with kids, I imagine.
Anything with kids, but I guess the hardest job is a patrolman. Anybody, troopers, whatever, is death notifications.
Ah.
When you have to go knock on somebody's door and tell them somebody's not going to come home. Those are tough, and especially when you know them, it makes it a little tougher. Small towns, West Texas.
Dang.
Yeah, but that's what you do. That's part of your job.
Wow.
And then there's a lot of great stories. When I was a trooper, that was what we call BC, before cameras.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't have cameras, and it was a fun time to be a trooper. We took care of business. And I have so many, funny memories. I remember one time I'd been out on the interstate. It was a summer day, kind of like today. And I'd got my book full, and so I just went out messing around. And I'm on a farm to market road, somewhere between Westbrook and Cuthbert. I'm just tootling around. And I see this truck coming at me. And I hit him with a radar and run 106.
Whoa.
And dang, so I light him up. Well, he stops right across from me. It wasn't like, you can tell he's a pumper. You can see the pipe wrenches and the shovels in the back. And I walk up there and I said, "Is there a medical emergency?" And he said, No. He said, I said, "What's the deal?" I said, a big green grasshopper on my windshield wiper, and I just kind of wanted to see how fast I go before he comes off. And I said, "How fast?" He said, "He's still there." And I told him, I said, buddy, I said, I don't want to get in the way of any scientific stuff, but I'm going to let you go. Because if I write you a ticket, that'd make me a hypocrite because I would have done the same thing. But I told him, I said, "Now, you got to make me one promise." He said, "What's that?" And I said, "Don't you tell a soul that I let you go for running 106. I said, "Understood?" He said, "Understood." Well, man, that was, and then later on that year, like October is when I transferred to Ozona, and I can't even remember what the guy's name was. Of course, back then we had landlines. There weren't no cell phones. And the guy calls me at the house, and he said, "Hey, I understand you're going to transfer to Ozona and license weight." And I said, "Yeah, I am." He said, "Can I tell that story?" And I told him, I said, "Not till October 1st. And I said, "October 1st, you can tell the story." I said, "But not until then."
That's funny.
Anyway, man, it was like October the 5th. I get about 15 phone calls. "Did you really do that?" And I said, "Yes, I did." We had so much fun, but we weren't under the microscope all the time. We had discretions. You could, small town, West Texas, you got to learn how to get along with the people or you won't be there long. you hug the ones that need hugging and you spank the ones that need spanking.
Yeah.
And, that's what we did back then. And these cameras are great. I know they do a lot of good, but I think the cameras take a lot of discretion away from our rural troopers, on the great evidence. But I think it kind of, I know that during the shootings that are going on now and stuff, I think it makes officers hesitant because they're scared of what's going to happen to them.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that can cost them their life.
Right.
So there's good and bad with it. But I'm done. I can sit here and, and the older you get, the better the stories sound,
Right.
But I worry about these kids nowadays, these young troopers, young officers, what they're going through. And we didn't have to go through that.
Right.
We didn't have to go through near what these kids are doing now. And I feel sorry for them, and I pray for them every day to be safe, come home.
Do you feel like there was as much or more excitement as a ranger rather than trooper?
Oh, as a trooper, there's excitement every day. Every day you go to work, you're going to run into something.
Man,
you're gonna run.
It's crazy to think about that, even just way out in West Texas.
Oh, there's the interstate.
You'd think that there'd just be like some days that were just quiet.
California kept us busy.
What do you mean?
Oh, Interstate 20. Yeah. That's where I was. I mean, and then I went from Interstate 20 to Interstate 10.
What were they doing? Just Californians in general? Or
yeah, I mean,
was there something specific?
You stopped. You never knew what you had, I mean, it was, God, we got a lot of dope. Got a lot of felons. Could
you tell, like, if you pulled somebody over, what percentage of the time were you able to tell just by their mannerisms?
Oh, about 2 seconds. Of course, like I say, I was old school. When you walk up there and you go through your 7-step violator contact, that first words out of their mouth is, I know if you stop somebody running, speed limit back then was on the interstate 65, instead of 75 or 80, what it is now. And you stop somebody who's running 85 and a 65 and they roll the window down about that far and say, is there a problem, officer? Yeah, there is. Attitude the first right off the bat. And then you have those guys that you stop them and say, man, I apologize. I had my head up my tail and, hey, we all do that. That's the difference between a ticket and a warning back then, it was the attitude was everything. You stop.
Was there anybody that do you ever remember like somebody almost giving you the slip as far as like, whenever they almost pulled the wool over your eyes?
Oh yeah. Yeah. Several times. I mean, especially in truck drivers, but, the biggest load of dope I ever got in my life was like 1,870 pounds.
Golly. When you say dope, you mean?
Marijuana. Yeah. And that was just a stop. And I had the guy in my car with me, and I'm writing him these long tickets. Our tickets used to be like a full page.
Before you realized there was dope.
Oh, I had him. His logbook was a wreck, So I'm going to spank him on that logbook. And I get down there to the cargo and stuff, and it's got a seal on it, or a seal number. And I'm at the back of the truck. I look up there ain't no seal on there. That's a no-no. When there's a seal number and no seal, that means that somebody got into the truck. And there's this huge lock on it, big lock. I'm like, where's that seal? Oh, he said, it's in my pocket. I felt my load shifting and I had to get in there and that ain't right,
Yeah.
I said, you got a key to that lock? He said, yeah, no. Just like that. Well, we had some big bolt cutters. And so I get him out of the car and take him up there and pop the lock off of that thing. And I tell him, I stand back and I said, open it up. And there wasn't, by then some other guys, some other deputies, and he opened it up. There's all these U-Haul boxes in there, and I mean you could just smell it. Holy moly! Anyway, so we arrest the guy, and I go back up to his truck, and I was standing on the side of his truck talking. There was a pistol right there in the door.
Dang.
He could have taken me out any time he wanted to. And I talked to him. I said, why didn't you shoot me and drive off? He said, I'm not shooting no trooper.
Right.
He said, I said, well, you got the pistol in there. He said, I need that for where I deliver this. He was going to North Carolina. But that was the biggest load up. I got a lot of stolen vehicles.
What kind of time would a guy like that serve?
I really don't know. I think he, it depends on priors and such as that too. You forget about that stuff. He probably 4 or 5 years. I don't know.
Yeah, 45 years.
Oh no, 4 or 5.
Gotcha.
Yeah, you're gonna have to do something really bad to get up in that 45 range.
Yep.
One of the biggest theft cases I worked. I sent several of them to prison. But this one kid, he was my. I turned him in from a crook to kind of a CI, and he helped me solve the case. And it was about $1 million worth of oil field drill bits. And we did a reverse sting on it and wound up making some good arrests out of it. And anyway, I was going to try to help him out a little bit, but he had some priors and stuff. And anyway, he failed the drug test, so boom, he went to federal pen.
Dang.
And anyway, I since retired, and then I was in the cattle raisers, and this kid worked out all the time. I mean, he was
in prison.
Oh, before he went to prison, but he was a gym rat, and came from a pretty scary family, what they say, but he's always good to me. And so a couple of years later, I stopped to get a cup of coffee at Sterling City, and this guy walks up to me and he said, "Ranger Wadsworth?" And I'm thinking, yeah, big guy. And he said, he grabbed me and he hugged me. He said, "I want to thank you for saving my life."
Dang.
He had a wife and kids, and he said, "I want to thank you for sending him to prison."
Right.
And I said, and he said, you saved my life. You changed my ways. And he said, "I appreciate it." And, that's a good feeling.
Yeah, it's got to be.
That was a good
because,
feeling.
prison seems to probably do the opposite to people.
Well, it depends on the attitude of the person. And, he was a God-fearing boy, Yeah. He's a big boy.
How scary was it having a dad that was a Texas Ranger?
Yeah, it's pretty terrifying. It taught me how to be real sneaky, though.
Real sneaky. I'm sure it was probably was it just constantly being held over your head by everybody else in your life, like teachers and whatnot?
No, so Dad didn't become a Ranger until after I graduated high school. He was licensed and weight all the way up until I graduated.
Gotcha.
I mean, he's still law enforcement and everything, but didn't have the Ranger thing hanging over until I was off in college, and it was pretty cool then.
Right. So did it help you more than it hurt you?
I don't know, with him being an officer helped me out a whole lot. Like, if he would have found out that I got pulled over for speeding and dropped a line like, "Hey, you know who my dad is?" I'd have been in way worse trouble than the ticket. But I did learn, just like he was saying earlier, just don't lie to him. Be honest.
Yeah.
Be decent.
Right.
That did get me out of some tickets I probably should have got.
Did you ever get pulled over and they recognize your last name because of him?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, I imagine because obviously they.
Well, it's usually they come back like, "Well, you know, Kitty?" Like, "Yes, sir." And then I'm like, "Oh shit, I got stories about it."
Did which one was the most fun? Trooper, automobile theft, or Ranger?
Oh, it's hard to say, but auto theft, I loved it. Man, I got to work with some of the best guys, and I was on the SRT team, special response team. We did, raids, and we trained a lot. We've got some great stories on that. I worked with some of the greatest guys in the world. And I guess one of my favorite stories, we worked a lot in West Odessa.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you've ever been to West Odessa, but it is, it's Saigon.
Really?
Yeah, it's pretty rough. Anyway, we had a raid over there as a meth deal. Anyway, you train and train and train. Well, my point man, short, stocky guy, and he was a bulldog. I mean, he was for real. As soon as they breached that door, he went in low right, I went in high left, and we covered the room, and then you move and you clear the house. And anyway, we were in this, junky trailer house. Man, and trailer houses are the hardest things in the world to breach because the door comes out. So we got it breached, ran in there, and my partner disappeared. I mean, I'm looking at her. He went through the floor.
Oh, dang.
And, that old plywood goes like this, and he couldn't get out.
Yeah, and you can't leave him.
No, well, I had to. We had to clear.
So you can leave him.
So we had to move in, and you're.
You got to leave him.
Yeah, well, but there's other people that will come in because you got a team leader between your two.
Uh-huh.
So team leader comes in, I take lead, team leader moves up, everybody moves up. And then you got your other guys they call in to come guard him. Anyway, we got the bad guy, and it turned out good. I loved hunting fugitives. Man, I loved hunting.
Did any of them ever seem prepared?
The fugitives?
Mm-hmm. Like when you had to do a raid?
Not that I...
It was always pretty much like you guys were clearly the more trained, and it was very
absolutely
professional.
And then, but as a trooper, I was at Waco. I picked up shuttle pieces. I went to several hurricanes. I got to see things that nobody will ever see again. I know the shuttle, when that shuttle crashed in East Texas, they sent me out there and told me it'd be a couple of days. I was wound up there for 2 weeks or so,
Mm-hmm.
And that was my first real experience with rural East Texas. And that was a trip. That was quite the trip.
What issues did you have then, or did you have issues with the border?
Oh, I was born on the border. I was born in Eagle Pass.
But as far as just like illegals and whatnot, what was the atmosphere like? Then,
Dale, when I was in license of weight, and it was in the mid '90s when we really started working the border. And I think for 11 years, I had to spend 1 week a month in either Del Rio or Eagle Pass. And I was born in Eagle Pass. And we worked commercial traffic, coming out and going into Mexico. And so it's nothing like it is now. There's a train wreck going down there now. But we worked that border. And then when I went into auto theft, my first station was Eagle Pass, but I knew every back street and alley in Eagle Pass, and I had a lot of choices because I was number one on the list. That's a different story, but the commander of auto theft, when I promoted, they call you and they said, "Where would you like to go?" And they had Beeville, Fort Worth, I can't remember all the towns. I told him Eagle Pass. He said, "Hey, let me call you back when you're sober." He said, "Why do you want to go to Eagle Pass?" I said, "Because I have relatives down there. I can live, on their property." And I said, "I know every back street and alley."
Yeah.
But when you go to Eagle Pass and auto theft, that's like fishing in a baited hole. Every day, you're reeling them in. It was a blast. And I had a partner named Tom Wiley who still lives down in, and he's about the craziest guy I ever worked with. But I tell you what, that guy charged hell with a bucket of water.
Was it maybe people having stolen vehicles out of like San Antonio and then Houston, you try to catch them before they go through?
Yeah, that's what was 90% of our stuff. Coming out of Houston, Fort Worth, San Antonio, Austin. We racked them up.
And they just come down there looking for a place to cross with a stolen vehicle?
Well, most of the time they go down there, they'll steal the vehicle there and go down there and pick up a load and come back, and that's when somebody would jump them. They bail out, but they're 99% of the time they're in stolen vehicles. And a lot of them are stolen rental cars.
And at that time, it's probably 100, as far as... So you're not even dealing with illegals at that point?
No, we're dealing with U.S. citizens, yes.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Because now I just imagine that it would be illegals that is like all they're dealing with now.
The cartels run everything. I mean, it's the people here who get paid to go down there and bring them out. That's the big deal. The narcotics and the illegals, and they've been doing it forever. Never to what's the.
So how do they operate? What is it that their cartels are doing exactly?
You're talking the wrong guy on that.
But I'm saying, like, even just what you were dealing with. What do you mean they run everything? What are they sending? What's happening with these stolen vehicles?
Pay and they're going to get part of it.
To get someone across.
Yes, and they'll tell you, we'll give you this much money to haul this many people back to Houston or whatever, and
so they'll steal a car, go from Houston down to Eagle Pass, get a car full of illegals to take them back.
And a lot of times they'll have somebody rent a car, and then they'll go down there in the rental car and pick them up. And then if they get jumped by a trooper or a sheriff's deputy or somebody, they crash through the fence into the pasture. And then whoever rented the car, they're going to be back home. They're going to call them and say, hey, call it in stolen. The car's stolen. So they do. There's a lot of that. There's so much. I'm telling you, those guys down there, that cartel bunch, not only are they deadly people, they're not stupid.
Are they mainly trying to traffic humans, or was it
everything?
A lot of drugs then too?
Oh yes, there's a lot of drugs.
What was the drug then?
When I was in there as a young trooper, it was a lot of marijuana, and cocaine was just kind of starting up a lot. You never ran in. I mean, very seldom would you run into heroin, or every now and then you get somebody with some pills. But it was mainly marijuana, cocaine in my time. And then at the end of my career, that's when the meth really got taken up, and that's the most horrible drug there is. I mean, I've seen it destroy so many lives. It's and now it's the fentanyl and stuff, and I never was around any of that. That was after my time.
It is shipping marijuana across now even a big. I mean, do they even do that at all, or is it more just fentanyl? And
I'm sure they do. I mean, I'm sure they do. Like I say, I've been retired for a while. I don't know what they're getting down there, but I'm sure they are. I know when I was with the Cattle Raiders Association, I was visiting with a investigator from Colorado, and he was telling me, that it's legal there in Colorado, and when you buy a bag of weed, it's got a stamp in it or something. Well, you got that stamp, and then you get weed out of Mexico and put it in the same bag. They can't tell the difference. I don't know how it works. But, it just say, because I think it's pretty expensive. I don't know. I never smoked weed. Don't care to. But, I don't really know what's going on down there now. I'm kind of off the border.
Yep.
But I do know that when I was down there, you'd hear machine gun fire, because I lived about a quarter mile from the river.
Mm-hmm.
And you could hear the machine gun fire, and it sounded like a war movie,
Dang.
You hear automatic, and every now and then you'd hear an old 50 go off, and when you hear those. And it was kind of like a war movie where at night you hear these machine gun fire in the background.
Have you seen Sicario? That movie about Mexico?
No, I don't guess I have.
Well, there's this border scene. Taylor Sheridan wrote it, and it just shows these Delta guys, these cartel members jump these Delta guys, and the Delta guys, obliterate them, and then they leave.
Right.
And he said, Taylor was talking about when he wrote the movie, he wanted to depict it as it would actually happen. Like it's not going to be a shootout and it's touch and go who makes it. These trained officers are going to be the ones that excel, and they just walk away 30 seconds later. I've always pictured it since hearing that. I've pictured that being the case. Like you guys, Rangers, highway patrolmen, etc., are just so much more trained. if something were to happen, it would almost be maybe because you got surprised or something, or ambushed or whatnot.
I do know that DPS, Texas DPS, has the best training, and things have changed so much since I first started. You know, DPS has a Navy. I mean, you get a chance, look up the DPS boats.
Wow.
Yeah, 300 horsepower engine, and I used armed to the teeth. DPS has an Air Force that is unbelievable, and I mean those guys train. DPS has a full-time SWAT team, and I look back as a young guy now wanting to go in. You know, when they think DPS, well, you're highway patrol. Yeah, you're going to start out in highway patrol most likely. You know, go there, work your tail off, do the best you can, and then there's just so many doors
Really?
that you can go into. You can go into the Navy. You can go into the Air Force. They're starting a horse patrol down on the river now. They got a horse patrol in Austin at the Capitol. I mean, there's just so many avenues that you can go into. You know, if you work hard and you know, it's a.
Did you not have intense training? Or I'm sure you did, but was it not as intense as a Ranger?
Oh yes, as a Ranger, you train a lot, a whole lot, especially that first year. I mean, that first year, you're in so many schools. I mean, blood splatter schools, fingerprint schools. I was a crisis negotiator, hostage negotiator. I mean, yes, lots and lots of training.
Having been in law enforcement for so long up into that point, though, did you feel like, man, there's a lot I don't know, or was it a little bit repetitive?
Oh, no. I mean, yeah, it is repetitive, but repetitive is good for you.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because, you know, whenever it hits a fan, you're going to rely on that training.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, and I was fortunate enough, the guys that I trained with and the instructors that I had, they were the best. You know, they were the best. And they had brought outside people in to train with us. And, you know, and which if you train and train and train and everything becomes a second reaction, believe me, when it does hit the fan, it does make you feel better. And it should make your family feel better. You know, because I would hate to go into some of the situations that we went into without being trained by those people.
Mm-hmm.
But, yeah, I was very fortunate with the people I worked with and the people that I got to train with. And you know the guy on the left of you and the guy on the right of you, they're just as trained as you are. So you didn't have to worry about anything. You know,
Mm-hmm.
you knew you were that we're going to win, you know.
Was it a relief whenever Dean didn't go into law enforcement?
You know, none of my kids went into law enforcement, and I never pushed them to go into it. I did not push them to go into it, and then I never really brought it up. As far as a relief, it wouldn't have mattered what he did. I would have been proud of him.
Well, the life of a rodeo cowboy is a pretty good alternative.
Right. Oh, it made my life that much greater.
A lot of times it's job security for the people who do go into law enforcement.
Absolutely.
I haul that kid all over the United States of America. That's where I met you.
Yep.
And that's some of the greatest times of my life. I've made so many good friends from all over the world. I mean, Australia to here. And, you know, those boys, I have so many of those boys that I call mine. You know, I love them.
Did because you knew Aaron Lyde, like, wasn't he from down there?
Yeah, Odessa Andrews.
Odessa, that's right. Where did you know him before you knew Jacobs?
Yeah, actually, Aaron's the one who introduced me to Jacobs.
Which, like, later in high school kind of time
Yeah,
frame?
I met them both my freshman year. I just met Aaron a few months before.
I'm trying to remember who else was from Ozona down there.
Clint Hale.
Yeah, there it is.
We grew up together. Zane Coates passed away, but he, hell of a bronc rider, went to school with us also. We were all in the
I
same
forgot
area.
about Zane.
Mm-hmm. Good bronc rider. He did every event.
Yeah.
I never saw him steer wrestle. I ain't saying that he didn't do it,
Right.
but he did all of them, and he was pretty damn good at all of them too.
Yeah, it's kind of a handful of you guys from down there that.
Yeah. And then, of course, going all the way to, like, my brother, he's 6 years older than me. And I think his senior year, Ozona had, like, 12 kids at the state finals and stuff. I mean, there's always been a lot of rodeo cowboys down there, mostly timed event guys. Me and Clint and them were – there was always a few bull riders and stuff, but we were kind of the first ones to really kind of focus on the rough stock.
How was it? How much did having kids affect walking up to a suspicious vehicle or doing a raid? Was it something you were able to get it set aside mentally?
You never thought about that.
Really?
No, you think about stuff like that when it's all done.
Afterwards.
But no, you don't. You cannot have negative thoughts. You cannot have, there cannot be negative thoughts.
I think about, like, I imagine, like, the, what's it called when you're in a CQB? Is that, what do you call, isn't that what you call it when you're clearing a house as a, that's.
Yeah, I mean,
but I was thinking
military,
about, I was thinking about the military.
Yeah.
And those guys doing that. But it seems as though, I guess maybe it is hard for them to know their enemy as well, because, when they might be clearing a house and there are civilians in there, but it maybe is easier for them to identify an enemy than it would be.
Well, absolutely. I mean,
law enforcement in the U.S.
We're here, and we have a lot more rules to play by than what they played by in Iraq and Afghanistan. Right. There's things are a little different. You have to really be careful, because it can end your career and send you to prison if you make a mistake.
Because you're dealing with somebody who has rights as a citizen.
That's exactly.
They're dealing
right.
with potential terrorists in another country.
You can't make a mistake. I mean, we got some guys, our SWAT team, based out of Austin. They're under the Ranger Division. Now, those guys, they do nothing but train. And we still have our SRT guys too. And, you do it, but I don't know if you ever played football.
Mm-hmm. Oh, man.
But,
I was an all-star, baby.
It's
a whole nother podcast. Let me go ahead and interrupt you. Back when I was quarterback, I'm just kidding.
But, when you practice and practice and practice and practice, all the two-a-days and all the stuff you went through, you can't wait for the game. You're tired of practice. You want to play right. You want to play the game. That's kind of how it is. When you train and train and train, you just foam at the mouth. You just can't wait to go to the game. Mm-hmm. And that's a lot what it's about. Because practice gets old, and and you just can't wait for and a lot of times, if anything can go wrong, it will go wrong.
You bet.
It's a lot of fun. Times have changed. I was a lot younger then, but it was a great time. But I guess one of the best times of my life is he started riding broncs as a freshman. Every moment I had, I was taking him somewhere.
It seems like you do get to go to those a lot. I mean, obviously now more that you're retired, but looking back at the years I've been around, Dean, like you were always at the ones that made sense for you to go to.
Yeah, I loved it. I mean, I loved it. I loved going.
Did you ever do any rodeoing?
Yes. I didn't come from a rodeo family. I fell in love with rodeoing when I was a little kid. And I don't know, I guess I may have been like a freshman in high school. And my brother played in a band. And Phil Line was my hero.
Mm-hmm.
Still is my hero. The greatest all-around cowboy that ever lived, But, man, I wanted to ride bulls because that's the cheapest thing I could get into.
Right.
And so my brother had a Cornet. So, he's off college. I loaded that Cornet. Got a buddy of mine give me a ride to San Antonio. I hopped
like a trumpet?
Yeah.
Yeah, he said he was in a band. He was in the band, the marching band.
Yeah, he was like
gotcha.
He was like in the marching band. But he graduated and gone off to college, And I hocked that hocked that cornet, went and bought me a bull rope and a pair of spurs, and I was in business. And anyway, I'll never forget the first bull I ever got on in my life. Had a little buck out there at San Antonio, and I got on this little bull, and I mean, he just cranked it right there. And I was so scared, I closed my eyes and I rode him. I said, man, you're the first guy to ever ride that thing. And I said, oh, there ain't nothing to this, you know. Not that I remember any of it. But anyway, the next 20 or 30 like to kill me. But I rode my first one. And I won a few rodeos. About time I got to doing, I was a good enough bull rider to stay broke.
Yep.
You know, I won enough money to stay broke. And about time I got to doing pretty good, that's when I shattered my arm, and it never
was the same after that.
Never was the same. I had 5 surgeries on it, bone grafts, and
that was at the Freeman in San Antonio.
Yeah. Anyway, but yeah, it didn't last long, but it was fun while it lasted.
Hey.
You know, of course, hauling them boys, and you know, I don't know, I probably cooked a lot of meals for you at some of the rodeos, because we'd always load up our cooking stuff, and I don't know, at Shawnee and at the circuit finals and at state finals, God, we cooked a lot of food for a lot of people. And I enjoyed that so much.
It seems like everybody knows you.
Well, you know, I'm so lucky. I got to meet all these people, and yeah, a lot of people know me. It kind of like the story about Leroy. You ever heard a story about Leroy? Old Leroy and his buddies, they lived down there in Austin, and they, back in the day, they loaded up and went to Dallas and watched the Cowboys play. And old Leroy, they left the game, and old Leroy said, yeah, old Troy Aikman, a good friend of mine. Them guys looked at him and said, you don't know Troy Aikman. He said, yeah, I do. I said, I bet you $500 you don't know Troy Aikman. He said, turn it around. We'll go to the Ranger, to the Dallas Cowboys. Man, old Troy Aikman, he walks out there. Hey, Leroy, how you doing? Runs over and hugs him. I said, dang, you do know him. So, yeah, good friend of mine. So they're driving back to Austin. They said, I bet somebody you don't know. I said, who's that? I said, back then, George W. Bush was governor. I said, bet you don't know George. I said, oh, yeah, good friend of mine. I used to neighbor him out there at Midland back in the day. I said, you liar, you know. Well, they just drive up there to the Capitol, sit around there and wait. No, George W. walks out, looks out. Hey, Leroy. That she runs over there and hugs him, gathers some money up again. And they said, I bet you don't know Bill Clinton. He said, oh, Bill Clinton and I used to stay swimming together. Good friend of mine. He said, I said, they load up and go to Washington. Sure enough, old Bill comes walking by and looks over. There's old Leroy runs over there and grabs him, hugs him. And the guy said, man, that's unbelievable. You know all these people. He said, I bet there's one person you don't know. I said, who's that? And I said, the Pope. He said, he used to be my preacher. Know him real well. They said, oh, you liar. So they load up and they go to the Vatican. And there's just this ocean of people out there. And he tells, hey, guys, this ain't fair. You know, there's no way that John Paul's going to recognize me out here. He said, let me just go in there and I'll walk out with him. They said, yeah, right. So he leaves. Man, sure enough, he comes walking out there arm in arm with old John Paul, looks out there, and his buddies are passed out. He runs down there and says, hey, man, y'all all right? He said, you know, I know you. I can see Troy Aikman. I can see George W. And I can see Bill Clinton. He said, but when you come out there with the Pope and all these people were saying, who's that with Leroy? I couldn't take no more.
Who's that with Leroy? Yeah. Oh, man.
Yeah, sometimes that's kind of the way I feel. I have people walk up to me all the time. Hey, Kenny, how you doing? I'm thinking, oh, I'm good. I wish I knew who you were, you know.
Right.
But, yeah.
Did, so how many total years in law enforcement?
I think wound up about 29.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what age did you retire at?
See, I'm 65 now. I ain't been retired that long, have I? About 3 years.
Yes, I think you right around COVID.
Yeah, you had said you started
before COVID. You retired.
Yeah,
you were 31.
Yeah.
Dang. Do you miss it?
Oh yes. What I miss the most is the people I worked with. God, I worked with some fantastic people. I mean, in all aspects, in highway patrol and license of weight, in motor vehicle theft, with the Texas Rangers, with the Southwest Texas Cattle Ranger Association as a special ranger. I worked with some great people. I mean, some really, really good people that they just make you look good. You know, you listen to them and they make you look good. You know, I was very fortunate to get to work with such a great group of people.
Yeah. So it wasn't, when you did retire, it wasn't necessarily something like, I got to get out of here, I can't take another day.
No, we had that little old ranch up there where we live now there, Dean, and I had those cattle up there. And, you know, in COVID and several other things, I needed to be closer to my cattle. All my kids had moved off, and I got a plethora of grandkids. And I think it was just time for us to move on and get up there closer. And, man, it worked out great. Worked out perfect for us.
Yeah.
And now I work for him in the leather shop. I got those cows. You know, I do a little bit of hay farming. And, man, it can't get no better than it is right now.
Yeah. Dang. Well, yeah, I you know, we've never gone into detail about the job, about being a Texas Ranger, so I was just curious what that was like. But
it's you never know what's coming.
Yeah.
You never know what's coming. I know I spent a lot of time in court on cases. You know, there's a lot to being a law enforcement officer, but there's really no difference. I mean, a state trooper is the same rank as a Texas Ranger. You know, a deputy is the same rank as a Texas Ranger. You just have different titles, but you all have the same end. You know, I don't know how many people live in Young County. I don't know who your sheriff is or who your deputies are. They run into as much stuff as a ranger does or anybody else every day. Every day. You know, to me, I never thought that I was any better than a deputy or a police officer from anywhere because we do the same thing. And, you know, we always call them the concrete rangers, you know, the ones from the big cities. And they do different things. Out where I'm at, we work with small sheriff's offices and PDs, and we're there to support them, help them, and that's what we're there. But we're no better than they are,
right?
In my opinion.
Yes, sir.
We just got the Cinco Peso.
Yes, sir.
And you know, which I'm very proud of that old Cinco Peso. But you know, but as far as titles or statute, I don't look at it like that.
I was talking to a guy. He had spent many years in prison and had run-ins with different law enforcement. He said Texas Rangers were short on temper and long on memory.
Well, that is true, but that is very true.
Yeah.
That's correct.
Yeah. He said you got to look out for Texas Rangers.
Well, that's our job.
Right.
You know, that's our job. You know, there's nothing better than winning.
Well, thanks for coming on. I appreciate it. I just wanted to get a quick word from a Texas Ranger and just hear some stories, but I'm sure some more will come to us. We'll have to tell them behind the buck and shoot someday.
Yeah, there's plenty of stories that I really can't tell because I'm not sure up on the statute limitations on a lot of that stuff. That yeah, I got some good ones, but
yeah,
they're colorful.
Yep, I hear you.
Colorful. Yeah.
Yes, sir. Well, thanks, guys, for listening, for watching. Look out on the roads out there because if a Texas Ranger finds you, he might throw you in the big pen. And thankfully, it's not going to be Kenny Wadsworth. And look out at the rodeos for my man Dean here. The original Deanie Weenie String Bikini.
I appreciate that.
The original.
I always hated that name, and then you gave it to somebody else, and it really did hurt my feelings for a little bit.
Yeah, that's funny because I was like, oh, Dean doesn't like it. We'll just give this other Dean. But then, it's just not the same.
You've ever taken a toy away from your kid and give it to a sibling? They really like it after they don't have it.
After they don't have it. That came from Sterling, right?
Is it Sterling or Jacobs? Probably.
Yeah. Jacobs came up with it. Sterling ran with it.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
He's never wanted to run a joke into the ground by any means.
No, of course not. Yeah. Check out rodeotime.com or another podcast, Rodeo Time blog. I'm Dale Brisby, and we're on to the next one, old son.